something along those lines. I mean, but it does have a quantitative, measurable quality. If you understand what I'm saying, so you can have like the Olympics, and you can have the Olympics like they have in sports, and you can have the best sex in the world. And I had a guy there. It was really funny because I had a guy there, Mr. McCready, who was the moral majority. He was all upset about sex being in cable television. It had to do with television and stuff. And I did a program with him. I got to find it if I can. It was really funny because
yeah, find it, Harold. I want it.
Well, I'm trying, and I don't have a deck to play it, and there's all these things. Everything in its time, dazzle gradually. But I said, Mr. McCready, I said, you know, Mr. McCready, I said, you got all these sex kittens saying this great sex and everything and all that kind of stuff. But you know, Mr. McCready, you know what I'll bet? If we measured it all, it wouldn't be all those little sex kittens that parade because it's not measured in any way. It's just subjective reports or looking at things from an objective perspective of somebody or something. And he said, but you know, Mr. McCready, sex is a very beautiful thing. It's an art. It's an art form. It's probably the highest art form. It's like dancing or something like that. And so I said, you know, Mr. McCready, I'll bet if we had that and it was, and I told him about this, it came up about this machine or this environment in which they can really measure what's going on quantitatively with a little graph. And below there would be a graph at the bottom of the page that's showing, and it's going up like they do with the instant replays at the political things. And he said, wow, you know, well, is that objectifying or what? And I said, well, just think about it, Mr. And I was thinking, what a marketing thing, you know. And could you see they could make an Academy Awards out of it? And it could be on a world scale. And I said, you know, Mr. McCready, he was a moral majority. And I said, you know, I'll bet you that the best sex that's really going on after all the glim and glamour and all that kind of stuff, it's probably not all those sex kittens and so forth. It's probably just a beautifully well-connected couple that mutually love each other and mutually respect each other. And you know, Mr. McCready, they've been probably happily married for 27 years out there in Ames, Iowa, and they're the ones that would really hit the high mark if we really measured because they respect one another and all of this. And you know, he actually almost thought, well, he might be able to go along with this idea of having this on television and having a show along. What a marketing ploy!
Wow, Harold,
Wait a minute, but he said he almost did, and then I said, you know, that couple out in Iowa is where the real thing is going on, and reifying all those wonderful values that are part of the Christian method and all of Christian view. And he almost went along with it, but I said it would be a very sad thing. Maybe we don't want to investigate if the sadomasochist got the high scores, you know. And it might, or the dog aficionados got the high scores. So it wouldn't reify, you know, the morals. But, you know, so I mean, it's an interesting subject that they can actually measure that. What goes on is that interval between the two. There's a resonating tactility. It isn't touch. It's just the measurement of the energy between the two bioenergetic systems. And wouldn't it be great? You'd have a guy in a white coat and lots of scientists, and they say, and the chart, and you could have, I don't know, some crazy Eddie type guy saying, and we've now got reported from, you know, I don't know, Hong Kong, China, there was a couple that achieved a 9.67. And the world would be interested in that if you could quantify it and have a chart. And then you'd have to have standards to make sure those things aren't jimmied and so forth. But then they would be getting at the reality of what is expressed, like between an oboe and a trombone in an orchestra. Anyway, it was really funny that he was almost ready to go along with it. It was going to reify the nuclear family out there in Ames have been living together on the farm for 27 years.
Do you remember what that scientific method of measuring sexual energy was?
Yes, it's off, it's the same sort of Christopher Bird.
Christopher
Bird. It's the same
Bird.
thing. It's like, they got that. It's similar. They got similar things like that. It's a thing, I forget what they call it. Now, Christopher Bird wrote The Secret Life of Plants, and they could measure the bioenergetics of a biological system. And he was able to demonstrate that plants experience what would be seen to be like emotion or pain. And when you cut down a grain of wheat, there is registered pain at the level of that. I forget the term. There's a term for it. But there are various ways in which you can measure the bioenergetic energy. and so you can just apply that in the scientific terms to, these sexual Olympics. You could make a whole big television thing out of it.
That's amazing.
Wouldn't that would really get ratings? Because this
Yeah.
would be the real thing rather than all the hype about what happened when the Earth moved, supposedly, according to subjective reports of individuals. But nobody has a way of tracking that.
Well,
An art form, it would be seen like an art form, like golf.
right.
Or like, something else, like Tiger Woods is really good. Then you'd have the best sex in the world.
Did you ever follow Wilhelm Reich?
Yeah, that's what it would be. Wilhelm Reich. First interview I ever did was a proponent of Wilhelm Reich. A friend of mine, was the first one I ever did. He was up in New Paltz, and he had been at the trial of Wilhelm Reich.
Wow.
And I did it, and they had an orgone accumulator. They call it an orgone accumulator. There's a little box like a privy you sit in, and then you accumulate orgone energies like prana. And that was part of his thinking and everything. I'm sitting, and he had it in his apartment. He had an orgone accumulator you sit inside of. And I was inside of there, and he asked me, "Do you feel anything, any orgone accumulating or something?" And I said, "Well, the air just feels kind of heavy. I don't know." But I had the microphone inside the orgone accumulator, and he was talking about, you can get orgone energy or prana or chi or something you can get. Yeah. So Wilhelm Reich was really interesting, and Jerry Greenfield, he was a great guy. He was really good. He was teaching up at New Paltz. He was a professor, friend of mine.
Well, let me put this.
I've read a lot of that. And then you had bioenergetics, Alexander Lowen, and all these kind of things that were sort of keyed off Reich. Yeah, he was an interesting guy.
Well,
that thing about commercializing on the Olympics, I still think that's something waiting to be discovered and to be made into a gigantic, big, like they have the World Series or something.
yeah, no, I think it's a great idea.
Great marketing tool. Do you see the interest in that?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting.
Right off the charts.
What's interesting to me now is there's a big controversy in the 9/11 truth movement about whether pornography is a good thing to spread the message or a bad thing.
Well,
and I think
you're not going to get within those pornographic things. This was the assumption for Mr. McCready. He was a Presbyterian, and he was very, very straight-laced and everything. And I said, you're not going to get the high scores with all that pornography nonsense and everything where there's no real feeling or anything. You're going to get it by that well-connected couple out there in Iowa that has been living together in wedded bliss. Now, what if you got terrible scores by all those people?
Well, you know, that was kind of the
upsetting thing.
That was kind of
the sadomasochists get the high scores.
That was kind of the point with Steve Neskis, because he was talking to Ugly George about penetration. And I said, what difference does it make whether there's penetration or not, because you're still a viewer? How can you give the viewers an experience where they participate?
You need a chart underneath that statement you're making that shows what's really going on. Do you understand? You would have a chart down there, and it isn't just the person saying, ooh, ah, or acting out some sort of a thing or something like that. You would actually be measuring what's going on at a bioenergetic level.
But that means you could measure the viewer.
And that's pay dirt.
But Harold, you'd measure the viewer.
Oh, the viewer, I don't know on that end. That'd be a different thing. You can measure. That's his thing. I'm talking about what goes on between two entities.
No, I know, but after...
Dog aficionados would get a high score. I don't know, but it would be interesting to find out. And it is eminently able to be done. Oh, the guy down at Westbeth. That's it. At that conference, there was a guy at Westbeth that had that kind of a system in place.
Well, let me put it this way, Harold. Did you have to be in physical contact with the partner for this machine to work, or could sexual energy go from across the room?
As far as I can tell from bioenergetics and all that, it didn't have anything much to do with physical touch, like you touch something. It isn't that. It's the interval between the two systems. It's a resonancy that interaccommodates two systems. You got two systems involved. And there's an energy flow between the two systems, and that's what it measured.
So you could be like really far away.
Well, you could be anywhere viewing that chart that's measuring the people that are in that environment, and you got couple A. Now we have couple A, and then and then they're performing or whatever. It's art, you know. It could be seen like as an art, and then people say, well, wait a minute, it's got to be a subjective, personal thing, and that's intruding or something. But for a marketer's perspective, that would be a That would be a real winner, because you'd have this chart at the bottom. You see, and we're so hung up on charts and measuring things and everything, and they'd be measuring what's actually going on bioenergetically between two systems, two people, two entities, right?
Right.
They'd be measuring it. There are other things that could key off that as well, that modern science has brought to our capability. And it was Christopher Bird measured that with plants and other things. And this guy had a system. He's down in West Beth. I think I've still got his name. I could try and look him up sometime. But he was an artist down there, and they had a thing like that. It'd be an environment that people would go into, and you're measuring the interval between the two systems. It's not touch. Tactility isn't touch.
Now, see, here's a picture of Krishna with the Gopi girls.
Uh-huh.
And so what I'm thinking is, if the energy is flowing, you're thinking of it just between one man and one woman. But Krishna, being, quite a guy, had this influence over many women. So that's why I'm saying...
Well, there's infinite varieties of how that could be applied, I guess. You could have what I'm trying to say is it would be something that the ad agencies could really get onto, or the marketers, because that would really touch the interest. And if you had a quantitative measure, like in baseball, you've got how many hits are into the outfield and so forth. It's not just people saying, I really hit that one good when he didn't. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but
I understand exactly.
Capability for that from the hustlers would be just a legion if ever they got that established with good standards and people in white coats, scientists all over the place, doctors all
people
over
in
the
white
place.
coats. Yes. No, what I'm going to do is put this out on the internet and see if somebody gives me some feedback, because I bet there have been studies. And I think they probably have advanced it, and I think that energy is energy. So whether it's between a man and a woman, or one or two...
Between a man and a man, a woman and a woman, a man and a dog, a donkey and a whatever, they could measure... Yeah, the point is we have that ability to measure what's actually going on at that subtle level.
Or a speaker in a group. That's what I'm saying. There's Krishna.
Well, that's another thing I think
there's a speaker, and then
they do. They measure that with lie detector tests and that kind of thing. They got ways of measuring and quantifying what's going on rather than just a person subjectively reporting.
You know what Michael Elner used to say is that happy people, and I think by happy he meant sexually fulfilled people, are harder to deceive. So you can more easily fool miserable people.
Don't you understand, if I may, that that's something that somebody's theorizing? And if you got a quantitative measurement of that, then you would have that little chart at the bottom that's showing what's actually going on, and that would be a marketer's dream.
Right.
Because you'd be quantifying what's actually going on rather than all the subjective reporting of the earth moved and things.
Yeah, but then what I'm wondering is...
People think that's intruding upon a personal realm of consciousness, and so there'd be moral objections and all that. But from a marketer's perspective, it'd be a definite winner. I bet that would become the all-time best-watched program, better than American Idol.
Yeah.
It'd be the Olympics. It would be like the Olympics. And they could have competitions, and we got a team in from Java, and we got a team in from wherever, and Mr. and Mrs. Somebody, and that. It could be a huge thing for the marketing industry.
Yeah, but I'm proposing that number went way down during 9/11. That's what I'm proposing.
Well, perhaps
when all the television fakery was going out and people were being misled. That's why I went with Steve Neskis. I was trying to say, what difference does it make what Ugly George was showing? At the end of the day, you're making programming that you have an obligation to the viewer to lift up the viewer.
Well, it's not something, that thing I was talking to that guy, it was fun with Mr. McCready. I think that was his name.
Yeah.
Because he almost was ready to go along with it when he thought it's going to be that happily married couple living according to all the moral precepts out there in wedded bliss for 40 years.
But he didn't want to take a risk that it might be the masochist.
But what if they got the terrible low scores? I mean, it would be very embarrassing for the moral precepts being presented and so forth.
Well, we can just put it
out.
out.
But as a marketer, that would be a real winner.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just